Well, good morning, friends, and welcome to Wake Up in the Word. Hey, thanks for joining me with the beginning of a brand new series I'll be doing on the man who divided time. Now, what are we talking about? Hey, grab a good cup of coffee and join me first over in John chapter 1, and we're going to talk about this beautiful series that's going to take me a long, long time because we're going to deal with the life of Jesus Christ. And if you deal with the life of Jesus Christ, you can't just depend on the New Testament. You have to go back to the very beginning of time. Matter of fact, it is the man who divided time, Jesus Christ, who actually created time in the first place. So we're going to be messing with your mind a lot today. So join us in this new series as we're going to walk through the life of Christ in a fashion that lays out a harmony of the Gospels when we get to them, so that you can see not just from reading through one of the Gospels, as you know, I finished Luke last year, but in a way in which we bring together all the Scriptures and walk chronologically all the way through the resurrection. So it's quite a trek, and the trek has to actually begin way before the New Testament. John alerts us to this in John 1:1 when he writes, "In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God." Well, in the beginning, wow, that means we've got to go somewhere else. We've got to go back to Genesis, don't we? And before we go to Genesis, let's let Paul, we've already let John tell us about this, let's let the Apostle Paul reflect on it as well. In the book of Colossians chapter 1, beginning in verse 15, he writes that Jesus Christ is what? The image of the invisible God, the firstborn over all creation. For everything was created by him. In heaven and on earth, the visible and the invisible, whether thrones or dominions or rulers or authorities, all things have been created through him and for him. He is before all things, and by him all things hold together. Wow, these are some powerful claims about who Jesus is. A whole lot more than just some teaching rabbi wandering around in sandals in the first century. No, this is the Creator come to heaven, from heaven rather, to earth, who has come down from heaven, as Jesus himself asserted in John 3. So what is it we know about this person? Well, it's amazing what we can discover about Jesus Christ in the very first verse of the Bible. That's right, go back to Genesis 1:1. And if you really want to get into an in-depth study on Genesis 1:1, go back to that amazing first verse of the Bible video that you'll find from PNN, and I did one on it as well. Or many of the other videos that are out there. One of my favorites is from a Messianic guy named Adam who has a channel called Truth Defender. Look for his video on the amazing first verse of the Bible, because he'll show you how it's not just the first verse, even the first word testifies to Jesus. That first word of the Old Testament is Bereshit, a word that is very rich in history with the Hebrew people. You can tell it because of the fact that, as many of you know, the nation of Israel actually landed a spacecraft on the moon. What did they call that spacecraft? Bereshit, the very first word of the Bible. Well, the thing about the Hebrew language is that it has 22 letters in its alphabet. Matter of fact, the word alphabet actually comes from Hebrew. It's the first two letters of the Hebrew alphabet itself, Aleph and Bet. Put them together and you've got alphabet. Well, strangely enough, each one of those letters also has with it a pictogram, which has a specific meaning as well. So quite often, if you want to get into the deeper meaning of a verse, you put those together. And you'll find something from Bereshit that we translate into English, in the beginning. You'll find that there are 6 letters there. When you put them together and start adding them together as they're next to each other, you come up with an even deeper meaning. Now, rather than going through all the depths of explaining each one of those individually, I'll jump to the end and give you the meaning as Adam describes it. In other words, that first word, not just the whole first verse, but the first word of the Bible has encoded in it that the Son of God will destroy sin by his own sacrifice on a cross. I mean, you can't make this stuff up, folks. Go check it out for yourself. But there's something even deeper in that verse that is amazing to me because of two little letters that don't ever find their way into an English translation. They didn't seem to make sense to translators, so they just don't try to translate them. And what that word is, or that meaning is far deeper than just two little Hebrew letters. For example, in Genesis 1:1, the actual word that is omitted in the original text is the fourth word, which again is not a word at all. It's just the two letters, Aleph and Tav, which are the first and last letters of the Hebrew alphabet. It's like saying the A and the Z, or remember from the New Testament, the Alpha and the Omega, the beginning and the end. So what are we looking at here? Well, Jesus tells us in Revelation 1:8, I am the Alpha and the Omega, who is and was and who is to come, the Almighty. That's precisely what those two Hebrew letters are saying. Jesus Christ is recognized in the very first verse of the Bible as the Alpha and the Omega. It's Jesus who claims to be that person, the Aleph and the Tav, the beginning and the end, the A to the Z, the one who is, who was, and who is the one to come. Is it clear now? Yes, Jesus Christ not only has been from the beginning, he is the beginning. He is actually the creator of time that we're going to be talking about. Don't you think it's important that we focus on him in these crazy days? You know, when I went to Hebrews chapter 11, which says we need to focus our eyes on Jesus, that author, perfecter, creator of our faith, who for the joy set before him endured the cross. That's the same Jesus we need to be focusing on in these days. So what I'm going to be doing with Wake Up in the Word in these next days is literally focusing on Jesus everywhere we can find him. The man who divided time, who makes the real difference to all of us. And you can't start his life in the New Testament. You have to recognize it first in the Old. Now, some of you that are pastors may have something in your library that I have. I've got those several volumes of Spurgeon's work, the Spurgeon's Treasury, I think it's called. He has one entire book, some of you may have this one, that's just Christ in the Old Testament, an entire volume, 60 sermons altogether. Just think about how long it would take us to go through those, because Spurgeon was quite wordy, and you couldn't go through one of his sermons in 10 minutes. You could be 6 months just going through this work. 60 sermons from the Old Testament on Jesus Christ. And as I looked at the titles of those, some that I have read before in this book and looked at that material, I could see all kinds of gaps in places where I know Christ is recognized in the Old Testament that Spurgeon didn't even touch. So friends, this is going to be quite an adventure as we look at the man who divided time. We look at Jesus Christ everywhere we can find him, and gather all the information we need to continue to stand up for him and promote that which is good and godly and the good news of his gospel until he comes. Because everything about time, from the beginning to a brand new time that's going to start shortly, is all about him. So the more you know about Jesus in these days, not only the more you'll be able to recognize him, to love him, and to follow him, but you'll be ready for what's coming. God bless you. Thanks for spending some time with me today as we start a brand new journey on Wake Up in the Word. I'll see you tomorrow.